Hi you guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Mina and today's video is going to be something very interesting. I am going to be doing a video where I read basically the books that I used to love and gave 5 stars to when I first became a reader. So we're talking like, I want to say between 2013 to 2016, maybe 2017 is pushing it a little bit. These are books that really got me back into reading. One of these books is the reason why I really became an avid reader, and they are something. They are something. When you think of BookTube circa 2014, 2013, these are the books that I usually think of, and these are the books that were very popular at the time that I enjoyed and loved like everyone else. I usually do end up rereading a lot of my favorites over the years. I haven't reread any of my favorites in a couple of years because there's been so many good releases and so many new books that I haven't had the time. So I'm basically using this as an excuse to basically reread old favorites and see if they hold up, if my opinion of books has changed, if my opinion on writing has changed, on if I really just gave those books 5 stars just because I want to see basically if I gave those books 5 stars just because of the hype and because of how old I was at the time, and see if I would give them 5 stars now. There's 5 books. And I feel like I've rambled enough, so I'm going to shut up now. But I hope you enjoy, and let's get on with this video where I reread 5 of my favorite books. Or I guess 5 of my teenage self's favorite top 5 books. I don't know. Just watch. You'll understand.
I've always been a reader. Don't get that mixed up. I've been reading for as long as I can remember. But this video is basically going to be me reading the 5 books that basically defined reading for me back when I was younger. When I was a teenager, when I was like between 14 and I want to say 17. These books were like what defined reading for me. They got me back into reading. They were the reason why I really went back into like being obsessed with books, because I had a moment where I wasn't reading anything, and then I read a very specific book from this video that basically catapulted me into becoming an avid reader, where I spend at least an hour every day reading. We're first starting with the one that has the least impact on me, but it is still one of the books that I think of when I think back on classical YA 2014 to 2017 types of books. I can always do a part 2 to this because I love rereading books. I'm not one of those people that are like, there's so many books out there, I don't have time to reread. No, I do. I will make time to reread an old favorite, but these books, I think 3 out of 5 of these books I haven't reread since I read them the first time, so that makes me a little bit nervous, but I'm excited at the same time. So without further rambling, let me get into what the first book is. Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell. And God, even this cover just on its own reminds me of like old BookTube. I have such a distinct memory of reading Rainbow Rowell's novels. I love Rainbow Rowell. I love her writing. I loved Fangirl. If I had Fangirl, I would be reading Fangirl and not this, because I enjoyed Fangirl so much and it meant so much to me when I first read it, and I really got affected by the story of it and just by everything. It's such a good book. If you haven't read Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, please do, because it is so good. Rainbow Rowell used to dominate the book scene back in the day, back in like 2016, 2017. Everybody was talking about her books. Everybody was talking about her writing, and it's you know, it's deserved because she wrote some staples for the BookTube community back in the day. And this book is about this girl. Her name is Eleanor, and she is living in an abusive household, and she's like strange and weird and doesn't really talk to a lot of people. This is just me, like, this is a recollection, so I don't know if that's actually the storyline, the plot line of this book. This is just from what I remember off the top of my head. And it's about this boy. His name is Park, and he becomes her friend, and I believe they share music. They like have a shared interest in music, and that's why we have like these 2 headphones. Like, she has a music player, I believe, like an old music player that she listens to, maybe cassettes or something like that, I'm not sure. But I remember this being a very heartfelt and impactful story, and it's very sad and very heavy, and I remember loving this when I read it, and I'm sure that I gave this 5 stars. Let's look on my Goodreads and see when I read this book last. It says that I read this book on June 13th, 2014, and I read it in one sitting, and I gave it 5 stars, which pans out. It makes so much sense. I am so excited to read this book, so excited to give it a try and see how I feel about it. Now that it's almost 10 years later, that feels insane to say, I want you to know. I can't believe I read this in 2014. I was a senior in high school when I read this book 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago. And yeah, I gave this 5 stars. I haven't read this book since I read it in 2014, so I'm very nervous. I hope I like it. And without further rambling, let's get on with this video. Like I said, I started Eleanor and Park yesterday and I read like 20 pages. And then this morning has been, this day has been very, very busy for me. So I only got to a page 120 when I was at work. I'm on chapter 21. I really want to finish this today and start the next book, but I don't know if that's going to be very achievable. I don't know. But this book makes me feel very strange reading it, because I remember exactly where I was and what I felt when I read this book 10 years ago. This book basically like defined booktube at some point, and to read it now as an adult with adult eyes, these are high schoolers and I was their age when I read this book. And I remember feeling so much about this book. I'm glad to say that the feelings of this book have continued to go on that exact same path that it was back then, because this book is so heavy and so full of heavy moments and heavy topics. I would check the trigger warnings. There's like an abusive dad in here, or I guess stepdad, and this book is a lot heavier than I remember it being. I was 16 when I read this book, and I remember being so enthralled by the romance in this book because I loved the characters. They seemed to be so shy and so cute with each other, and it seemed so genuine and so well done that it doesn't feel like it was insta-lust or that it was insta-love or anything like that. It feels like very pure and pure-hearted and very cute and very... It needs to be protected. Like their love for each other, the way that they feel about each other, it should be protected because it's so pure and it comes from such a good place. And I cannot believe I feel the same exact way that I felt about it when I was 16 versus now. It holds up, except there's some problems with it. Like there's some fat phobia in here. There's some racism in here, like towards a lot of different races. And I didn't really catch on to that when I was 16, because back then it was very different. When you read a book, you didn't really, at least I didn't really pay attention as a 16-year-old to like racism or like fat shaming or anything like that. I didn't really pay attention to that stuff because I myself was a little bit heavier at the time. So it didn't really mean anything to me. I just was like, oh, this guy likes this girl even though she's big, and that's like unheard of. But it shouldn't be unheard of. And so I am catching on to those things now when I'm reading it right now, but I did not catch on to them when I was 16, which is, I feel like it's normal because as a 16-year-old, I wasn't really reading critically. I was just reading to have fun. My goal is to finish this today. This is how much I have left, which is doable because this book is like 300-ish pages, 320. So it's very doable, and I really want to start the second book so I can finish it tomorrow. I actually was planning to read this book and the second book today and finish them both today, but that obviously didn't happen because I had a lot of things to do today. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to sit and read until I finish this book, and then I'm going to pick up the second book. Have finished Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell, and I was going to film a time-lapse of me reading the end of this book, and then it completely got away from me because I was so engulfed in the book. So let's talk about it, why don't we? So I'm giving this book 4 stars, not 5 stars. It's getting demoted from 5 stars to 4 stars because as much as I have a nostalgic attachment to this book, it's not that good of a book. Honestly, hear me out. It felt incomplete. The ending was incomplete. I didn't like it. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of sus about it. Like the fat phobia, the racism, sexism. The parent of Eleanor failed her so much. There's like domestic abuse, there's a lot of stuff happening in here. Please read the trigger warnings if you're planning on reading this book. It's still good, but I don't know, had I had the nostalgic factor to it, if I would have given it 4 stars, because in my head I'm still like 4 stars is a lot, and I've enjoyed books that I've given 4 stars a lot more than I've enjoyed this one, and I'm giving it 4 stars purely because of the nostalgia, because this book means a lot to me, and I read it when I was 16, and it's come full circle to where now I'm reading it as an adult, and I'm like, all the adults in Eleanor's life let her down severely. No one was being an adult, no one was being safe, no one was looking out for the kids in this book, in every wrong way. Even the teachers were horrendous, the parents were horrendous, other than Park's parents, who were actually decent human beings. Eleanor's parents were stupid, and they failed her, and the teachers failed her, everyone failed her. It's still a beautiful story. I still enjoyed reading about Eleanor and Park and the way that their relationship blossomed. It feels the same but also different reading it now versus 10 years ago, and I'm glad I picked it up. I'm glad I gave it a second chance, because I've had this, believe it or not, I read this book as a library copy, and then I bought my own copy and I never read it again. I probably won't be rereading it. I'm not going to lie to you. I probably won't be rereading it again, because it's just a heavy story and the ending is very up in the air. Nothing comes to a full stop period, you know, and I hated that about it. So that's my review. I finished it. 4 stars. I don't know. The rating still feels a little bit off. I don't know. The next book that we're gonna be reading, if you were on BookTube anytime during the 2014, 2013, 2015, like prime of BookTube, then you would know this book. You would have guessed it. The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. Look, this cover screams nostalgia. Screams nostalgia. I even had a birthday cake that said okay on it at some point in my life. I have a tattoo related to this book, and I got it in Amsterdam because of this book. If you've read this book, you understand why I got it in Amsterdam. This book is basically about these 2 people who suffer from cancer, and they're teenagers, and I'm sure even if you haven't read this book before, then you've at least seen a quote or 2 from it, because this was very popular. John Green basically created the YA genre, for me at least. I've read every single one of his works from back then. I haven't read his newer works, but his older works, ate it up. He is one of the people that really got me into reading because of his books and how easy they are to read. I bawled my eyes out like a baby the first time that I read this book, and then I watched the movie and bawled my eyes out like a baby afterwards, and I haven't reread it since because it traumatized me, and the ending of this book is still like embossed in my brain and I can't get rid of it. And there's like some lines in here like, I lit up like a Christmas tree, Hazel Grace. That is up here. I'm pretty sure when my 7 minutes of my life flash before my eyes, this book will be one of them. The cover is screaming in my face nostalgia. I read it before I had my Goodreads account, and that means that was probably 2014, 2013. I want to say 2013. Wish me luck, because I haven't reread this not once since I read it the first time. So yeah. It is Tuesday, April 9th. 3:38 p.m. and I have not filmed a singular thing today, but that is because it has been a very, very long day. I picked it up today and I have been reading it ever since I woke up, basically. I just took a nap because this book is really freaking sad, and I took a nap and now I woke up and I believe I have less than 100. Yeah, I have less than 100 pages left. I'm on page 253 out of 313. This is how much I have left. This is how much I've read, and I believe I'm like 80% in, if not 85% in at this point. When I picked this book up, I want to say 15, 16 years old, because that was around the era where I was beginning to get back into being a reader girl. And so these were like the top rated, top talked about books back then. And I remember hearing things nonstop about this book, and about Hazel Grace and about Augustus Waters. I was heavy on Tumblr back in those days, and if you were heavy on Tumblr back in those days, then you would have seen at least 1 quote or 2 of John Green's writing. And a lot of them came from his other books, but some of them did come from this book. There's so many just like really, really defining quotes that are in this book. Like, some infinities are bigger than others. Maybe okay will be our always. Very, very heavy, but also very, very childish at the same time, which I didn't realize as I was reading this book. Obviously, as I grew older, I realized how pretentious Augustus Waters is as a character. One of the most pretentious characters I've possibly ever read about. But you like him because he is so likable and so charming and so funny, and he's so young. Reading this book hits a lot more different as an adult versus when I was their age when I was reading it. Of course, I knew it was unfair the first time that I read this book, that these kids are dealing with something so much bigger than them and so hopeless, basically, and helpless. And I knew it was it's a disaster. But at the time, there was nobody in my family that has ever had cancer, or I've never had personal experience with cancer. I didn't know anybody who's had cancer. And they say like cancer is something that affects every single family at least once in their life. This book is very heavy for it to be YA. And I've noticed that a lot of YA books, at least back then, are very heavy and very like philosophical in a way. The part that I stopped at before I took a nap because I could not read anymore is the part where things get really, really bad. And if you've read this book or you've watched this movie, then you know where I'm at in this book. Things get really, really bad for one of the characters. And it's so hard to see because in the beginning of the book, the character is so lively and so full of life and so happy and like they joke all the time. And then you get to the end of the book and they're the complete opposite and they're going through the worst thing possible. I remember what I felt about it because I, believe it or not, I annotated this version. Me and my sister both read this book, this exact edition, and she annotated it and I annotated it. And so looking back at the things that I annotated that I would not annotate now is so strange, and it feels like I'm visiting my older self by reading this book. I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody. I don't know. This just feels weird because, like I said, I haven't read this book in 10 years and I haven't thought of these characters in 10 years and I haven't thought of the story in 10 years, and reading it now is very different, which obviously it would be with any other book as well. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to finish this book, and I believe I will have the time to pick up the third book of this challenge today. The third book of this challenge basically created 25% of my personality and how I think and how I see the world. And when I think of books, this is like, I'll explain to you once I get to it, but you'll know why I'm saying these things if you've read it yourself. So I'm going to finish this book and then I'm going to pick up the third book, and I'm scared. Finished The Fault in Our Stars by John Green, and I cried. I'm so proud to say that I cried. This book still holds after 10 years. It is pretentious. I stand by what I said. The characters are very pretentious in here, but what teenager isn't at the same time? Like, teenagers are also very pretentious. I was very pretentious the first time that I read this book. I love this book. I stand by what I said. I stand by my thoughts and opinions from when I was 16. Also, of course, they've changed a little bit since then. I'm not giving this 5 stars. I'm giving it 4 stars because it's not the best book ever written, but it's not the worst book that's ever been written. I don't believe I've ever read a book about cancer patients ever. After reading this book, it felt nice. It felt like a hug, like a comforting hug to be back in the world where my younger self found comfort in. And I used to love this book a lot. This book used to be one of my favorite books of all time. Obviously, it's not anymore, but I still love it and I still hold nostalgia for it, and I still love it as a book and as something that kept me company and kept me comforted during the time that I needed it most. And so 4 stars, probably mostly due to the nostalgia factor. I would have probably given it less had I just read it for the first time now, but I also would have cried a lot more had I read it for the first time just now. The next book that I'm picking up is one that created 25% of my personality as a teen, and that is Looking for Alaska by John Green. Yes, another John Green book, because I'm telling you, this man basically created the YA genre for me. And this book was one of the very first books that I bought with my own money. And I remember buying it from Amazon for $10 at the time. And I couldn't believe my luck that I got this book for $10 after doing surveys for money for Amazon gift card so then I could buy this book. And I had no business reading it at the time that I was reading it. I didn't understand half of it because this one is very much more pretentious and like deep, I guess, philosophical than The Fault in Our Stars. This is about this girl. Her name is Alaska Young, I want to say, and this dude who is named Miles, and he's just starting college and he's scared and he makes friends with these people, and Alaska ends up being this hurricane of a girl. And this book has come out with a lot of quotes that are all over Tumblr. So even if you haven't read this book, I'm sure 100% sure you've at least read one quote that's from this book. This book created the genre. This book created a lot of angsty teenagers and a lot of angsty Tumblrs and reblogs of quotes and stuff like that. This book created half of my personality back then. I still say some things that I read in here, like the only way out is through, which is something that Alaska says in this book, and I still use it to this day. And I remember being very, very attached to this book and these characters and to Alaska, even though she is one of the worst characters, I think, in my head. The older that I get, the more I'm like, Alaska is such a hot mess. And this book would have not existed had she not been a hot mess, but maybe I'll look at it with different glasses now. This book created the angsty teenager that I was and the way that I acted and the way that I thought. And this book is a lot smaller than I remember it being. This book is 221 pages, which is a lot shorter than I remember it being. Every time I look at this book, I have like a very sentimental attachment to it. I don't think this will be given 5 stars because personally, this book is the one that I think back on the most, that I'm like, oh my god, this book was so pretentious, with full of pretentious characters, horrendous characters. This book was also made into a TV show, I believe, for Hulu. I've never seen it. I've never seen any adaptation of this book because I just hold it as it is. It's just the book that it is. If you asked me what my favorite book was back then, this was it. If you asked anybody in my family if there was one book that created my character, it would be this one. And the last 2 that I'm doing this challenge, this book created the angsty teen genre for me in my life and the angsty teen period of my life. I don't want to spend more time with this book than I have to be honest. I'm kind of dreading it just because of how pretentious it is, because John Green, as much as he is a great author, he's also the author of the most pretentious books that I know. So this is the book that we're reading next, and I gave this one 5 stars, obviously, and I don't think I'm going to give it 5 stars now. So it is 10 o'clock p.m. on Wednesday, the 10th. I believe that's correct. And I am reading Looking for Alaska. I am this far in, have this much left. I'm on page 210 out of 221. I will give you my full like thoughts and opinions and review and wrap up once I finish this book. But just know, I am struggling. I'm struggling severely to get through this book. It's taken me all day. Mind you, it is 200 pages, so I could have finished this no problem. And I'm so disappointed because I really thought that this book would be like better than it is, but I guess there's some things that you come across at the right place at the right time. This book happened to be one of those things that I came across at the right time, at the right place, that I ended up giving it 5 stars, but the thoughts are completely different now. It's very, very, like I said, I'll review and give you my full depth review once I finish this book. It's not looking good though. It's not looking good. Like these last 10 pages, girl, I'm struggling. And I should not have been struggling because I ate this book up the first time that I read it. And I loved it, and this was my favorite book, like, for a period of time. So I'm very shocked, very disappointed, but also, I don't know, it feels very different because so far I've kind of enjoyed the books that I've read up until this point that I've reread, and I'm not really enjoying this one as much as I thought I would, which is a big disappointment. But also, it is what it is, you know, like, you can't win them all. And I really almost did DNF this book like 3 times, and I didn't. So at least there's that, you know, like, I'm pushing through it. I'm pushing through the hesitance of me reading this book, but I'm going to sit here and I'm going to finish this book, even if it takes the last of me. Today is Thursday. I finished, as you guys saw last night, I finished Looking for Alaska by John Green. And I have some very conflicting opinions about this book because this book used to be one of my favorites of all time. When I first read this book was the first book that I spent my own personal money on. I spent days and weeks doing online surveys so I can get an Amazon gift card so I can buy this book, and then I bought it off of Amazon, and this was for the longest time the only book in my collection. This book is not about a character who goes to college. This book is about a character who goes to boarding school. He was 18. He's 18 years old, I believe, or 17. He goes to seek a great perhaps, and I'm sure if you were on Tumblr, if you were on BookTube back in 2013, then you would have heard the phrase, I go to seek a great perhaps, and it came from this book. This book was larger than life. That's the best way I can describe it. It felt so new and so different, and I think the reason why I gave it 5 stars is because it was so new and different, and I'd never read anything like this book before. This book is mostly character driven. There's not much that happens in here other than the one incident that happens in here, that there's like the before and the after. He doesn't have friends, but he comes to this boarding school and he makes friends with these people, and then he meets Alaska Young and she changes his life. And this book is so pretentious and so fake deep, and other than the iconic quotes in here, like if people were rain, I would be a drizzle and she'd be a hurricane. That's like one of the quotes, TM, that came from that time, from this book. There's so many lines in here that were quoted on Tumblr over and over and over again, and guess what? I reblogged them every time, and I will continue to do so. But it just, as a 26-year-old reading this book versus a 16-year-old reading this book, I think a 16-year-old is the exact right person to read this book because it feels like you're experiencing what these characters are going through, and it feels like so much. And so, like, the best way I can describe it is that it felt larger than life when I read it the first time, and reading it now just felt like, oh my god, you are so pretentious, all of you. Like, Alaska is one of the worst main characters that I've ever read about. She is deeply flawed, deeply annoying, does not think of anyone but herself. She's so irritating, so fake deep, and I just don't like her, and I didn't like her the first time that I read this book. I gave it 3.75 stars, which is a big demotion from the 5 stars that I had given it before. I'm really disappointed because I almost DNF'd this book 3 times, and I could not for the life of me get myself to push through the first 100 pages because it was just so mind-numbingly annoying, and the characters are so, I guess it's good that the characters are so flawed because they are teenagers in this book, not even really adults, and so obviously at that age you make a lot of mistakes and you think you're invincible and you think you're deeper than the rest of the world and no one thinks the way that you do, and like you're special and everybody else isn't, and you're going through this crisis because you don't know who you are and you're trying to figure out who you are. So I understand where it comes from when it comes to that, and like how flawed and how many mistakes the characters make, but at some point it's just like reading it from the eyes of an adult. I'm like, girl, like, let's not do all of that. This next book that I will be reading is one that really cemented who I am as a reader. This book changed my life, literally, and I'm not even being dramatic. I have a tattoo of something that one of the characters say in this book, and this author became my favorite author after John Green. This book changed my life and changed who I am as a person. Without further ado, this book is Divergent by Veronica Roth. This book is one of my favorite books. I still think of this book constantly. Like I said, I have a tattoo that says "Be brave," which is something that one of the characters says to the other character in this book. This book is about this girl. Her name is Beatrice, and she lives in this dystopian world where you are, like, everybody is separated into 5 different factions, 5 different categories. You're either erudite, amity, candor,
abnegation or dauntless. You either value honesty, intelligence, selflessness, bravery, or peace. And she is born into this family that is abnegation, so they value selflessness. And at 16, in this world, you get to choose if you want to stay in the faction that you were born in or if you would like to switch into a different faction. The opening line of this book is cemented in my memory forever because I went through a period where I reread this book once at least every year ever since 2013. And that says a lot. My safety blanket, my safety book, my comfort book. I hate the last book in this trilogy. Say what you will, the Divergent movie, just the first one, unmatchable, inimitable. She is that girl. I will continue to watch her for the comfort value that she brings me. I watched it on opening weekend with my sister when it came out in the movie theaters, and I just remember like when they revealed who was going to play the love interest and who was going to play Beatrice, and I was there before there was even talks of being a movie. This is the book that we're going to be reading today, and I will probably finish it today. If you haven't read this book, I strongly recommend, because this trilogy is popular for a reason. It changed my life, and so I will always tell you to read it. This will always be the OG girl, and this is what really like head on catapulted me into becoming the reader that I am today.
Friday. I just woke up. That's why my voice sounds like this. I have this much left, and actually not all of this, because that's like bonus material. So really this is how much I have left. This is a 5 stars. Like, I already know. I don't need to finish it to know. This book is, I'll tell you my opinions and thoughts on it a little bit later. I just wanted to update you because yesterday I spent the entire day reading. I didn't put this book down. I didn't want to put this book down, and so I just read this entire thing yesterday because I was so happy to be back in this world and to be back in this story and to be back with Tris and Four and Christina and Will and Peter and everyone. I love this book. I love Veronica Roth's writing, and this book makes me feel so nostalgic for the life that I lived and for who I was back then. And yeah, I just have a lot of thoughts about this and a lot of feelings and a lot of nostalgia connected to this book, just because of how much it impacted me when I was younger. And so yeah, I'm enjoying myself. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update because I didn't update you yesterday, I don't think. I gave this book 5 stars. This book is one of my favorite books of all time. It will always remain one of my favorite books of all time, just simply for what it did for me as a human and as a person and as a teen when I was going through so much in my life and everything was up in the air and I didn't know what I was doing or who I was. This book really helped me find myself. The very first tattoo that I got when I was 18 years old was Be Brave. It helped me get through all of the rough patches in my life for a period of time. So this book means the world to me. I was so happy to be back in this world. It felt like greeting old friends and being comforted with a warm blanket that just came out of the dryer on a cold winter day at night when it's like cozy and warm. That's what this book makes me feel. I love this book. I love the characters. I love everyone in here. I am so happy that I got to dive back into this world because I haven't reread this book in a very long time. Tris is my favorite character of all time, and I just think it's fascinating and it's so good. And I was so hesitant to pick up this book the first time that I picked it up because I was like, oh, it's science fiction and I'm not really into science fiction. And for some reason I just kept putting it off. And I remember when I finally picked it up because I saw it being reblogged all over Tumblr, and I was like, okay, I'll just give it a go, I guess. Why not? And I'm so glad. This book changed my life, changed who I am, changed a lot of things about me
and changed the chemistry of my brain, as dramatic as that sounds. And I love this book, and I will always love this book. I will always have a soft spot in my heart for this book, and I'm never gonna give it less than 5 stars just because of what it did for me and how much I love the characters. And 10 years later, I'm still so amazed by Beatrice and how strong of a character she is and how much she goes through and never gives up, and I love her. So you're probably wondering, what is it? Which book is it that will be ending this video? So the last book that I will be reading for this challenge that I've already started reading is Shatter Me by Tara Mafi. And this book, I have so much to say about this book. It's actually, the funniest thing is that I read this book for the first time in April of 2013. So exactly 11 years ago. And that's insane because this book was my favorite book series for a very long time. Like this book series by Tara Mafi. When I first read this book series, it was still just a trilogy. There was no talks of the second half of the series coming out yet. Warner is one of my favorite human beings on this entire planet. I have a tattoo dedicated to this book as well. And it says Ignite because one of the books in the original trilogy is Ignite Me, and that book is my favorite in the entire trilogy. And I'm using this video as an excuse to read this book and get past it so I can get to the rest of the books, because I am planning to reread this entire series because I haven't reread the series in years, and I used to reread the series a lot because Warner, he is number one. I've read so many books in my entire lifetime. None of them have ever come close to the man that is Warner. And if you don't know what this book series is about because you've been living under a rock, let me explain this to you. So this takes place in a dystopian world in the future. And then there's this girl. Her name is Juliet, and she is in confinement because if she touches a person, they die. That's like her curse in life, basically. And she is like spiraling. This entire book, she's spiraling because she can't touch anyone, and she's been in confinement for 264 days. And then all of a sudden she gets a roommate, and he's a boy. And we go from there. I have such fond memories of reading this book. I'm already 100 pages in. This book has the novella Destroy Me in the end. So really it's like 320 pages from what I know. This is how much I have left. And then this is Destroy Me, the novella. I had never blushed as hard as I did than when I read Ignite Me. And I wish the second half of the trilogy, like the second half of the series, didn't exist because I preferred it just as a trilogy of its own. But I still enjoyed the second half of the drop of the trilogy. I don't really hate it as much as everybody else does. I don't like one of the characters in here, to be honest. He's annoying and he's so irritating, and I cannot stand him, and he only gets worse before he gets better. And so for that reason, this book just makes me so annoyed. I woke up this morning after I read Divergent, then I immediately picked this book up and I read 100 pages, and now I'm going to sit and binge this book until I finish it. For a little bit more. I'm now on page 205, so I've read 100 pages, I believe, since the last time I updated you. I am so happy to be in this world. I am so incredibly happy to be reading about Warner and Juliet. This book is so fun. I love being back in this world. Like I said with Divergent, it feels like I'm jumping back into a place that I know, and that is a comfort space for me, a place that I found myself in when I was going through the hardest time of my life. And reading about them again, I've missed these characters, and I'm so excited to move to the second book and to the third book, to the Unravel Me and Ignite Me. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I am going to continue reading this book. I'm eating it up. Just wanted you to know that. I am so happy to be back with Warner, reading about him. The scene that I adore in this book just happened, and I'm eating it up, and I'm living my best life. Shatter Me by Tara Mafi. I gave this 5 stars. I enjoyed this book so much. I was so happy. I already told you my thoughts and opinions about this book. I was so happy to be back in this world with Juliet and Warner and Adam, I guess, and Kenji. My Goodreads says that I reread this book 5 times before today. I'm really, really happy. I'm so glad I got to read this book again, and I'm glad I got to make this video where I got to read all of the books that I used to absolutely adore. 5 stars, love her, love him, love this book series, love this world, and I'm just so happy I got to read it and be back in it again.
That is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know down below if you did. Let's recap the books that I read for this video. First, we had Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell, and I enjoyed this one so much. This one was a lot deeper and a lot more meaningful than I remember it being. I believe I gave it 3.5 stars. Because of the nostalgia, down from 5 stars, which it used to be. The Fault in Our Stars by Dawn Green, which is a staple back in the book community, back when I first started reading. I still love it as much as I did back then, even though it's pretentious, and Augustus is one of the most pretentious characters I've ever read about, him and Hazel both. I think I will always love this book just because of how much it means to me and having read it at the right time and the right place. Looking for Alaska, which used to be my favorite book for a good, I want to say 5-year period. This book was it. This book created half of my personality back when I was 16, 17. I think this book is pretentious, the most pretentious of John Green's works, even though I love the man. My rating went down from 5 stars to it being 3.5 stars, and that's just because of the nostalgia factor. This book was very hard to get through just because I just didn't enjoy the story. Nothing happened, and it was just character driven, which sometimes I do enjoy, but the characters that I was reading about this time were not ones that I enjoyed, and so therefore it made the book feel a lot longer, even though it was like 221 pages. Divergent by Veronica Roth. I already spoke enough about this book and how much I love this book. This book means the world to me. You do not understand. I love this book. This book is my everything. It will remain my everything. This book helped me through the hardest and the worst time of my life, and I owe so much to Veronica Roth and to Beatrice from here, and to Four, and to Christina and Will and Peter, and I just love everyone. I love the movie. I love the book. I will never stop speaking about this book. This book is my comfort book. This book felt like being hugged the minute that I read the first line of this book. It felt like I was getting a hug from an old friend, and it made me really emotional, and I just really, really love this book, and I really love these characters, and I can't say good enough things about this book other than I just love it, and I'm so glad I got to pick it up at the right time and at the right place. Lastly, but certainly not least, we have Shatter Me by Tara Mafi. I still love this book. I still love this book. I still love Warner. Still love Juliet. Still love Kenji. I gave it 5 stars. Still, I had the best time. This book is the hardest to get through out of all the Shatter Me books. This book is the slowest, because you're getting into the world, but I still loved it. I still enjoyed it. This, like I said, with the rest of these books, this felt like stepping into shoes that I used to love for the longest time and that I stopped wearing, or like listening to a song that you used to love and haven't listened to in 10 years, and then you listen to it again and suddenly you remember every single line of the song. That's what it felt like reading this book. I love this book. This series will always be one of my favorites of all time. I'm so glad that I still love this book and I still enjoyed my time, and I read it in one day, and I will definitely be continuing on with the rest of the series. This week has been very, very strange. It felt like I stepped into the shoes of my younger self and her reading tastes, and being back to where I lived and my room and where I was in my life at the time, and it felt so strange but also so comforting at the same time. I definitely want to do a part 2 where I read some more books that I loved. I have so many more that I haven't even scratched the surface. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you do want that part 2, because I will definitely be reading the books if I make the content or not, so let me know if this video idea interests you. I had the best time, so I hope you have the best day. Treat yourself to something nice, and I will see you guys again next week with another video. Goodbye.